brother who passed. Um, he was my hero. Um, he went through a lot of struggle. He went through a lot of strife. He succeeded in life. He succeeded in passing on a legacy of a great man who did great things musically, spiritually, and left behind a family who loves him, a family who will always remember him. Personal hero, Octavia Butler. She's a personal hero. I mean, she's advancing the foundations of black literature and black science fiction out there. Also, I want to give a shout out to Charles Saunders, another black sci-fi writer. Well, he did fantasy, but he gave me a black Conan that I could look up to. I mean, I always liked Conan, but once I found out what the author was like, he wrote something that I could look up to and say, okay, I can be the great barbarian and still achieve. I can be the hero. I can save the damsel. I can defeat the evil sorcerer or whatever. But that hero can look like me. The hero can look like you. The hero can look like my kids, your kids, somebody that I can look up to. May not be for everybody, and that's fine. But something I really, really enjoyed. Historical. Well, every day I find out new historical facts about people who I thought were great, and they ended up not being very. I mean, they were just people. But probably Attila the Hun for not putting up with established bullshit, creating his own empire, his own kingdom, creating a legacy that's living on in a lot of us because a large percentage of us are his direct descendants. Just by, hey, you know what? Your way of warfare doesn't fucking work. You had to build a wall across an entire country to keep me out, and it still didn't work. So, go Attila the Hun. Not saying he was a great man, but he did what he got to a level of very few of us are ever going to get to.
My name is Daryl Gray, and as far as my heroes, I have a direct family ancestor by the name of Ralph Gray, and by far, family member-wise, he would be who I would identify as a hero. And I'm going to talk about or read one of the experiences that is written about what happened with Ralph Gray and my great-grandfather, Tommy Gray, Ralph Gray's brother. So it says here, alongside his brother, Tommy Gray, Ralph Gray joined the Communist Party and helped found a Tallapoosa branch of the Croppers and Farm Workers Union, CFWU, in April 1930. Okay? The CFW's demand that landlords restore the traditional cash advances struck a chord with Tallapoosa blacks, as did its program calling for a minimum wage of $1 a day, the right of tenants to market their own crops, the extension of the school year for black children to 9 months, and the provision of free school transportation. By July 1930, the Grays, assisted by Matt Code, an unemployed black communist steelworker from Birmingham, had increased CFWU membership in Tallapoosa to 800, but achieved few concrete victories other than the restoration of cash advances for a few tenants. Nevertheless, the simple fact of black political organizing, not to mention the involvement of the Communist Party, terrified the region's white power structure and made a violent confrontation almost inevitable. On July 15, 1931, Tallapoosa County Sheriff Kyle Young deputized a posse of whites to break up a meeting near Camp Hill, where 80 CFWU members had gathered to discuss the case of the Scottsboro Boys, 9 African-American youths falsely accused of raping 2 white women who had been sentenced to death by an all-white jury 5 days earlier. After assaulting many of the Unionists, both male and female, the white vigilantes moved on to the home of Tommy Gray, my great-grandfather, and attacked him and his wife, who suffered a fractured skull. The beatings ended after the timely arrival of an armed and extremely angry Ralph Gray. Upon discovering copies of the Southern Worker, the police arrested 2 of the Unionists for possessing Communist Party literature. Unbowed, a crowd of 150 CFWU members gathered the following night at a church near Camp Hill. Expecting white vigilantes over the authorities, the 2 were barely distinguishable. Ralph Gray established a picket line and stood guard a quarter of a mile from the meeting. When Sheriff Young, his deputy, and Camp Hill's chief of police approached Gray, an argument ensued and shots were exchanged. A New York Times report claiming that Gray fired first was based largely on police accounts. Within moments, both Young and Gray were on the ground. The sheriff shot in the stomach, Gray unable to move because of several bullet wounds in his legs. While Young was rushed to a nearby hospital, and a posse moved on to break up and fire on the CFWU meeting, Gray was left at the side of the road to die. Some comrades rescued him, however, took him home, and called a doctor. The physician responded to the call, but also apparently alerted the police to Gray's whereabouts, prompting the heavily armed white posse, now 150 strong, to descend on Gray's home. There, one of the posse forced a pistol into Gray's mouth and shot him dead. After burning down his home, the mob then placed Gray's brutally beaten and bullet-riddled body on the steps of the county courthouse, a clear warning to other Tallapoosa blacks of the consequences of joining the Croppers Union or the Communists. And so that was about 4 or 5 years ago. It was the first time that I actually got like the formal history of that story versus the passed down oral history passed on to me by my father from his father, my grandfather, and just the underlying impact of what that event has on my family and the gray men even to this day. My grandfather, being extremely young at the time and literally witnessing the injury to his mother, the persecution and imprisonment of his father and oldest brother, he also had an opportunity and unfortunate circumstance of witnessing the way that the community, to a certain degree, kind of turned away. And so my grandfather went into the armed forces during World War II along with his older brother, and I never really had an opportunity to talk to my grandfather and really find out if what occurred with his uncle, with Ralph Gray, if that was the basis for him and his siblings to, many of them leave Camp Hill and leave Alabama and come to the north, come to Michigan. Others went to Ohio, others went to Pittsburgh. But I often wonder what would have happened with the Gray family if Ralph Gray would have survived. I mean, he had clearly had political influence. He had a desire and wanted nothing but the best for his family and community. And so, again, I wonder what the trajectory of my family's life would have been if not for that unfortunate circumstance The relationship between my father and my grandfather was not great. Um, my father was born in 44 during World War II. Um, was a young man in the late 50s, early 60s, was in the Air Force during the Vietnam era, and for much of my life, there was a great deal of, um, I won't say animosity, but there wasn't a very firm connection between my grandfather and my father. And knowing what I know as far as the story of Ralph Gray and my great grandfather Tommy Gray, I think that that was the product of um, my grandfather and my father both having a different worldview based upon their perception of the world from the perspective of what occurred with Ralph Gray. I think my grandfather's perspective was, and in turn it kind of came down to my perspective, is that we live in a world, especially as black men, where the world is not going to look out for us. And we have to look out for ourselves, even if it means that we may lose our lives. My father, in turn, he had the same perspective, but his way was not necessarily fighting it. He knew that those things were wrong, but he felt, I guess, to a certain degree that should be paid, or that the world owed something. And I agree with that as well. I believe and advocate for reparations to not only African Americans, but any people who have been subjugated to mistreatment and misuse by any community, government, such. However, I don't expect it. I think that it's deserved and warranted. However, it is not something that I will lose any sleep or hold any animosity towards any government or any individual if it is not done, because ultimately only the Creator can do that, or bring proper spiritual reparations. But again, my family hero will be Ralph Gray.